I think we can get started with this part of our program for this evening. It looks like you'll be voting again this evening.
That's not good.
For the moment. That may change.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, so has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes? Any discussion, changes?
That we accept them.
I have a motion to accept.
I would second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, done. Now we're moving right along. All right. So, fairly timely. Okay, we've invited you to please come talk to us about some things that are disturbing the peace, if you will.
Okay, but in your packet, the first page is, we made up a bulletin of our own, similar to the State Fire Marshal's Office puts out bulletins when they have particular issues like propane. For example, would be a propane grill regulation from the state that says you can't have propane grills on a condo, on a multi-unit condo. So we decided to make our own, it's actually the first one we did, a bulletin on this so that when we go to do inspections or we come across things that we think are an issue regarding this, we can start by handing this to them and saying, here's a real simple bulletin sheet on what the law says, what the law doesn't say. So that's the first page. It's pretty straightforward and basic. I didn't want to do anything. The second page is a bulletin, I believe, that the Fire Marshal's Office put out that talks a little bit about the difference between 1 and 2 family rooming and lodging, and then you get into rentals and hotels and all that. The third page is a letter that we sent to the Fire Marshal's Office to try to get a little bit better information from them, which I don't feel we succeeded in. But the other is the next page is what the Fire Marshal's Office sent me back, which is okay. We'll talk about that. And then the other pages are some examples, if you read the letter from the Fire Marshal's Office of some issues they had other places, which is pretty, looks like a lawyer a little bit. It's pretty, you can read that at your leisure.
I'm impressed that you guys started being concerned about this last April. A lot of places.
Well, we've been thinking about it longer than that. I guess the first thing for me is keep in mind, this isn't my rules and these ain't the town's rules. This is a state's rule. Everything we pretty much do is this book and 17 others, all the codes. This is 101, NFPA 101, and it's everything from rental, everything from 1 and 2 family to commercial businesses to industrial to mercantile, places of assemblies, everything we do. There's another book like this, it's NFPA 1, which is more of maintenance stuff, like how you deal with a fire extinguisher and where it goes and fire access and a bunch of stuff like that. This one is like the Bible specifically for the places we inspect. And then there's like 14 books that bring this down, thicker than this, that bring this down to each individual.
Wow.
You know, like if in here, it might tell me to, has to be a fire extinguisher. Right out there. Well, I can go to the book that talks about fire extinguishers and read in great detail about why it has to be a certain height off the floor, why it has to be red, why it has to... So it gets pretty detailed. These are really good because there's a blue section with it that does the code, and then there's the explanatory section. It gets a little bit easier to understand on some of it. So it's not the town, but it's not ours. The good part of not having, and this affects when you guys are thinking about this stuff, the good part about the town, we don't have a lot of ordinances regarding what I do. We actually created one last year. If we have the ordinance that trumps this, then it's in our lap when we gotta fight it. When we go with this, it's in the fire marshal's lap to fight it. I can say, you're gonna have 3 apartments in your building? Well, you can't do it. And they don't like that. So then I can be like, go see the fire marshal's office. It's not my role. I'm just the middleman here. I just have to. Technically, the fire marshal's office is the authority having jurisdiction on the local AHJ. So technically, they're actually my boss. There is some ways that you can, there's some ways that you can actually become a AHJ kind of over the fire marshal's office, but it's better to not have it that way, I think, especially in a small town. So that's what I did with that. I gave you guys a bunch of stuff. Where do we want to start?
Okay, I got a question. I didn't see it in here, but is this anything directed toward sort of the J1s where, down in Conway, North Conway, people got a house and they got, 15 kids and...
Yes, we don't, one means nothing to us or an FBA, whatever that means. But as I explain the difference between two, you'll see. And we can definitely talk, make sure you bring that back up, because different towns have different issues, which I think is what I know Senator Conway had an issue with something similar to that, so we'll definitely talk about that, so don't let me forget that.
Jay, how do these requirements in the building code and so on work with somebody who has some veteran place up on Tyrol and rents it out, 3 nights at a time?
So the definition of a 1 and 2 family house, your house, anybody's house here is a 1 and 2 family. You can, by this code, FDA 101, you can have, if I get involved with it as a fire department, you can have your family and up to 3 guests, outsiders, and stay there, and it's considered a 1 and 2 family. They consider a 1 and 2 family. So your house, you can break it down to your family, 3 guests, and a second family, and 3 guests.
Wow, okay.
So that's what we inspect and regulate. That's what, when we look at a 1 and 2 family house, that's what we look at.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we go inspect a 1 and 2 family house by someone asking us to, or a brand new house being built, it's the only time we can go in. Those are the only 2 times. We can't, very difficult to just say, I want to come inspect your house. I can't do it. Well, being invited. Or when it's first built. Or a major upgrade, where we get into the building permit stuff and occupancy permit. So, one of the difficulties with that is the definition of family. Fire Marshal's Office and NFPA, which is Federal National Fire Protection Association, that's federal. The state accepts this from, they design it for the federal government accepts it, the state accepts it, and we accept what the state fire code is, which this is incorporated into the state fire code. The definition, you will not find the definition of family in here or anywhere. And any time there's not a definition in here, you have to go to Webster's. You go to Webster's, because it tells you that in a code. 1 and 2 family, basically, family does not include grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and 47 relatives. It's basically you, your husband, and your kids. I actually Googled it. says, traditionally consistent of two parents rearing their children. So you can't, the way I interpret this, you can't count your grandparent if your parents, your parents, your grandparents and your aunts and uncles and your 12 other cousins come up here for a vacation. That doesn't count towards the code of what a 1 and 2 family house is.
Yes. There would be guests.
Yes, they would be the part of the 3 guests. One of the problems with that is proving that. The enforcement side of that gets pretty tricky, and if you needed to.
So this applies for even just like that many people there for a weekend?
Yep.
Yeah, so don't wait.
I'll give you an example. I guess this is as good a time as any for this example. Let me back up a little bit. We looked at this last year. Me and Kevin spent a bunch of time in the fire station looking up rental stuff on websites and computer stuff in Jackson. And I don't know, I know I looked at 50, 60, 70, right? I only found 2 that I felt might possibly be doing it illegally from my codes. So, one of my, that doesn't mean I wasn't missing a few. One of my things, if I would never create an ordinance or a rule or a regulation based on having 1 or 2 issues over the course of 70 different things or 200 different things. For example, we talked about the fireworks ordinance that people have talked about in the past. Between the PD and me, we're lucky if you have 1 complaint a year for fireworks, or have 1 issue. I don't know ever catching anything on fire in Jackson from fireworks, ever. And I've been there 30 years, 29. I have said this, there's no reason to create an ordinance for fireworks in Jackson. The state already has one. When we're going to have 1 issue, if that. Now, if you had 20 complaints in a year for 2 years in a row, then that might dictate creating an ordinance. That's just my opinion on that. Same thing with this. I'm not seeing, as far as the way my codes read and what I have to enforce, I'm not seeing a huge amount of illegal stuff going on as far as my laws. I know one place that I knew was possibly going to be an issue. So we've been watching it a little bit. Not that that's all that easy to do, because you don't know when people are renting it. They might rent it 1 week, they might not rent it for another month. It's a very big house, a lot of bedrooms. I gave him, the owner, this sheet when we were there. I'll just say that, we were there doing some inspection stuff, and some work that was done. And explained it to him, read it to him. Twice I've seen, on a busy weekend, I've seen 12, at least 10 bulk cars there. So, very recently, I counted the cars, because I was near there. There was 10 cars. So if you do the math, that was just 2 weeks ago, a week ago, so. If you do the math and you think about the definition of a 1 and 2 family house, there you could be legal. Okay. Yeah, you could look at it and say, okay, well, there's 3 different state, Massachusetts plates, Connecticut plates, whatever. But you say to yourself, okay, 2 husband, wife, kids, and 3 outsiders. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's one side of it. You could do that twice.
But if it's a single-family home,
1 and 2 family. There is no such thing as a single-family home. They're all 1 and 2 family.
The code is 1 and 2.
Code is 1 and 2 family
I
home.
had no idea that a single-family home wasn't really a single-family home. I didn't
No, they
understand.
consider it 1 and 2 family dwellings shall be limited to buildings containing not more than 2 dwelling units. You can't go to a third dwelling unit. So I don't have a separate code from a 1 family or a 2 family. They're all 1 and 2 family. So you're allowed to put husband, wife, 2 kids, 3 kids, 4 kids, whatever, and 3 outsiders. And you can do that twice. And I don't have and the only thing, if I go in a 1 and 2 family home, the only power I have of inspection is smoke detectors, CO detectors, egress windows. That's it, really. No, I mean, oil burner inspection, egress windows is the big one. So I don't have, even if I go into a 1 and 2 family dwelling, I don't have a lot of power like I do for room and lodging, motels, places of assembly, things like that. There's a lot of stuff I can regulate. Can't regulate very much on 1 and 2 family.
So when
It's
this
pretty
talks,
dry, I guess.
so when this B&B Life Safety talks about guests from 4 to 16 people, that means above the particular family unit they've got.
Yeah, the next, once you go over 1 and 2 family, you get into room and lodging, which is 4 to 16.
And those are guests, not residents of the home or
Correct.
people who are tenants.
Correct. I don't think that includes, like, in a room and lodging establishment, I don't think that includes, I don't know if that, I can't remember if that includes owner or not.
So Junior comes up to his family house up here.
Yep.
He's got 4 bedrooms, a couple of them are bunk rooms, and he brings up, 11, 12, of his drinking buddies from college.
I perceive that as illegal. It's got to be regulated as room and lodging, so that means your house has to be sprinkled and alarmed.
Geez, good thing that you went around.
That's one of the problem areas is that particular scenario. So you come up from Mass and you pay for the whole thing. You rent the building, right?
Or it's even a family building.
Or a family cabin.
Well, actually, you have 2 different issues there. If you were to rent somewhere and you bring up 14 of your kids, 14 of your friends, by the codes, as far as I'm concerned, it's illegal.
But that's a landlord's problem.
But still, my stuff goes by occupancy. So I don't know how you occupy the building is what my codes go by. So it's can be my problem if I want it to be. The problem is, well, you don't know when that's happening. By the time you know, it's usually too late. Unless something happens and we have to go there for something. And then you gotta prove that they're not family, I guess. The fire marshal's office there's been some discussion with other, like North Conway Fire, and we had some long discussions about it, and some other people say, well, who's paying for it? Which I don't see how it gets paid matters, because everything I do here goes by occupancy. This bill
It's been rented.
doesn't talk anything about how things get paid for. So I don't see that as an issue, but I have heard that. Another issue is we don't have a lot of support from the fire marshal's office on this, almost none. This is very political in Concord, very, very, very political. A meeting I had a year ago in North Conway with all the valley chiefs and the fire marshal, right before I sent him this letter, I think. It was, anti-regulation is huge in Concord right now. That was a year ago, huge. Like anything the fire marshal's office tries to do to regulate anything, there's boatloads of people with a lot of power right behind them squashing it.
Jay, what's your understanding of the hazards the fire department experiences? Let's say that there's a house that has a big wood stove in it and it gets new people in every week, every 3 days or whatever. Are there issues of people not really knowing how to work the wood stove?
Wood stoves are always an issue for us. I mean, rental, especially like we're constantly getting false alarms for people that have fire alarms because they don't know how to open dampers. On the rental side, like I won't say where, but that's a constant issue. Now, when me and Kevin were looking this over and we were playing on the computer a year ago, I got thinking about it a lot. And we're lucky, Jackson's lucky in the fact that most people's houses are pretty nice and pretty safe. So if you really forget about the codes for a minute and think about the large majority of Jackson, we really don't have a lot of unsafe houses.
Well, that's comforting.
They're usually pretty expensive, pretty safe. I mean, there is some places on Tyrol that are built on the edge of huge rock walls with an egress window that's hard to get to and stuff. But most houses have lots of egress windows, the proper size. I mean, there may be one or two places that you could say are not as safe. That brings me to what you brought up. Now, another town south of here, another town south of here had some issues with what you were saying. I don't want to slumlord for the right word, but video on, but places that were housing a lot of people, putting people in basements, things like that. That was an issue in South Conway, I know. So I don't see a lot of that.
Not just.
Here. Not gonna say it doesn't exist, but the percentage is.
They pack these houses down so kids can basically walk or
Yeah.
ride their bike to the restaurants.
Yeah.
And they just pack them in.
Yeah. But I don't see a lot not a lot concerns me, I guess, with the safety of the rentals that are going on in Jackson. I mean, there may be a few, I'm not gonna say there's not. The fire marshals, in one of these, the end of what the fire marshal sent us back, you'll read it, where he really hits on the fact that sprinklers save lives. And there's just absolutely 100% truth to that. And they're trying to pass for every new house to have sprinklers. Because the residential code on sprinklers is not that difficult to do in a residential house. And I put them in my basement. Pretty basic thing. I kind of had to, because I had a bedroom down there with no egress window. So by sprinkling sprinkling buys you a lot. It gets away from a lot of these codes. If you sprinkle, you don't have to do this, you don't have to do that, you don't have to do that. So you'll read where he's pushing that, because they've tried twice. And like the Home Builders Association squashes it, and all the anti-regulation people squash it. But it'll come, it's just a matter of time. We do have 3 or 4 houses in town that are sprinkled. So, you know.
Is a place like the Schemo sprinkler?
Yeah, yes, Schemos is sprinkled. Schemos is sprinkled. Once you get into rooming and lodging, once you make the step from 1 and 2 family, and you become rooming and lodging, which is 4 to 16, I believe, anything new is supposed to be sprinkled. If it's existing, don't think it has to be.
So Eagle Mountain House is, I think.
Yeah.
Snowflake, Wildcat.
Yep, Snowflake, Schemos, the Tavern is brand new sprinkler.
Okay.
We basically forced them to do it.
Oh, kitchen
We
garden.
allowed them, it took them 7 years, but it was getting done. So we were pretty lenient on that. It needs a sprinkle. Christmas Farm has got some sprinklers in it, pretty minimal, the old part.
So do do you have concerns about short-term rentals that we should be trying to
From the
address?
fire department side,
Yeah,
I really don't. I mean, I'm sure there's a few that aren't doing it the way my codes and rules say. I don't, because I don't see a lot of unsafe houses. I don't, like I said early on, if you have 150 rentals and you have one or two or five that are problematic, you create an ordinance just for that? I don't think so, just like fireworks, like I explained. The other problem you got, if you decide to create an ordinance for this, just keep this in mind. You can talk 4 hours for inspection. By the time I research it, prepare for it, drive up there, inspect it, drive back, do my follow-up paperwork, and then possibly do a follow-up inspection. So at 4 hours for one inspection times 150 rentals, there's only 52 weeks in a year, you create a part-time position or more, depending on how many rentals you go with that. And keep in mind, you create an ordinance that trumps the state, which it will, then you bought it. You don't get, you're not gonna get, if you get into a fight on it, you don't have no support from the fire marshal's office.
Okay. From a perspective of, you're talking about ordinance, would this be something, this does not seem to be something that would fall into the planning board's purview rather than the selectmen's purview? From a,
I don't know who would create the words. It's always come from the planning board.
okay,
Most wording of any of our ordinances, as far as I can remember, I don't think, I know there's been a little bit of ping pong, you know, you do it, oh, you do it.
yeah.
But mostly it comes from the planning board.
But where would, where, I guess the question I would have, where would the push come in? From members of the public who are looking for?
Well, I wouldn't think the push would be if there's members of the public that think, or I think, or forget about me, members of the public think it's an issue, then they would either come to the selectmen, and the selectmen would tell that the planning board is your plan ordinances and stuff. So I would think it eventually is in your lap. I mean, that's who's created all the, most of the zoning in this town has come from this group. So one of them said the ordinance law, that I'll tell you what happened. The state law only permits me, the only thing the state says that I have to inspect is places of assembly. So, and what constitutes a place of assembly is basically a restaurant. So when you have a restaurant that seats more than 100 people, it becomes a permitted place of assembly. So whether it's a restaurant that seats 200 people, or whether it's a hotel with a restaurant in it that seats more than 100, that becomes a permitted place of assembly. If somebody builds a hotel in town, and it's 47 floors, and there's no restaurant in it, it is not a permanent place of assembly. So the state law doesn't require that I inspect it. So, before I was here, there was a lot of inspections being done that the law didn't force them to inspect it. They chose to inspect it. Well, the town didn't have an ordinance to force me to inspect it. So we came here, Goody came here, and said, well, that inspection is not legal because there's no one says we have to do it, and there's no ordinance in the town that says we have to do it. And we shouldn't be doing it, because if you do it, it can get into some legal stuff with whether you're allowed to do it. If you read under the powers of the fire chief, the powers talk about you have the power to inspect anything, but you gotta do it in just a certain way, such as creating an ordinance where the town says you shall inspect. So that came up with us, like bed and breakfasts, nothing says I gotta inspect it. Motels, nothing says I gotta inspect it. So we just chose last year that we were gonna, the selectmen and I chose that we should be inspecting motels such as the Snowflake, Covered Bridge Motel, and the one over there. Those are the only 3 motels that we got that are not places of, permitted places of assembly. They might be a place of assembly because there's more than 50 people in it, but it's not a permitted place of assembly. And the bed and breakfasts and the ski clubs. So we kind of wrote a really simple ordinance. We shipped it off to the lawyer, and he adjusted it and shipped it back to me. I readjusted it again, talked to him on the phone, and we come to an agreement that this makes sense and it's easy to understand. So we created one that says we shall inspect from time to time bed and breakfasts, motels, places where people sleep, whether it's not a 1 or 2 family dwelling. So now we have an ordinance behind us that gives me the authority to, now maybe I won't inspect ski clubs every year, maybe we'll do them every 3 years, things like that. So that's what we did with that. It gets confusing because it can be a place of assembly, but it's not a permanent place of assembly and things like that. The other things that we inspect is the state mandates that we do oil and burner inspections, oil only. That law is like ancient. Like that goes back into the 1800s late 1800s when the very first oil burners came out. It's a really, really old state law. Whenever oil burners came out, early 1900s, I don't know.
So not propane burners or something?
But not propane. And so let me explain that. You do not need a license to install an oil furnace. So they force us to inspect them. You do need a license to install a propane furnace. So because they're licensed, the state doesn't mandate that we inspect. So, well, it's no different than you or electrical.
Yeah.
We don't inspect what you do because it's your license. We don't inspect.
I think
You know what they expect.
But they don't inspect what electricians do because they're licensed.
You know, I was thinking of properties in Jackson, and the property you're talking about, I think I know where it is. It's probably got at least 8 bedrooms. It used to be a bed and breakfast, and there are times
And
there's
it's
6
brown.
to 10 cars there.
I counted 10 a week ago.
Yeah, and there are some weekends, it's all young people, it's not families.
Yeah, the problem is, yeah, you're right. I mean, somebody could rent it, one person could rent it, and they could bring up a wedding party and a whole bunch of people, and as far as I'm concerned, it wouldn't be legal by the way I interpret the code. So that would mean, in order for somebody to rent a house out like that and rent it to large groups of people that don't meet the 1 and 2 family definition, that building would need to be sprinkled and possibly fully alarmed among emergency
It's
lighting.
an old building, mostly.
Yeah, so that's where that's the transition there. Anything above that, there's probably no sense in us tonight talking about what goes on between motels and stuff like that, because it just gets.
Do you, Jay, at this point, do you feel that what you have available to you is sufficient for you to do your job and
Yeah,
maintain safety?
Yeah, yep. I mean, I guess there's always going to be those few that are breaking the law.
Right, but you have adequate things available to you to.
The only thing
I guess.
I'm unhappy about is the fire marshal's stance on this, because there's a brand new fire marshal there, so we'll see if things change. I doubt they will. But because this is so political in the state, and I have no support in this, a lot of gray areas in definitions, in, the definition of family and all that. Issues, I wrote down some issues. We don't know when people are renting in the short term, So unless we get called for an illegal outside bonfire and we show up and we look and we say, all right, what do you guys do? Oh, we're having a static party. All right, so now what do you do? You gotta call.
But it's entertaining.
You know, yeah, all right, give me a beer. So when you do, you know, how do you enforce it, you know, and, or you see the cars there and you say, well, okay, I'll go check on it Monday morning, everybody's gone, and you can't prove nothing. Not much support from the fire marshal's office, and anti-regulation is huge at the state level.
Do you need us to do something differently then, at this point? Or are you just raising this as an alarm? kind of thing?
Yeah, I knew you guys were talking about it, and I've been looking at it, watching it, trying to figure out if we have a problem and how we deal with it, and like I said, I'm repeating myself, but, you know, if I saw 25 houses or 30 houses that were not illegal, then I feel we have a problem.
Okay.
But if we don't have that many out of, I don't know how many rentals are going on in town. I know there's 50, because I counted 50.
Yeah.
But if there's 150 and there's, you know, it's the same thing I explained with the fireworks ordinance. You know, it's, you have one fireworks between the year, does that mean you create an ordinance for it? No. And it gets, if you create it, this is something else to think about. If you create it, now you own it, you can't just pick and choose. You have to inspect them all. So now it's going to get, at 4 hours of time, it ain't take long to hire help.
I think, at least from my perspective, I think the only reason we would want to create an ordinance would be to support you. And if you feel that you're not able to get your job done, or it's raising a problem that it can't be addressed with what you have.
Yeah, and I would repeat myself again, I don't see a lot of unsafe houses where rentals are going on. You know, not other towns, I can see that.
Yeah.
But here, and people that we have here,
Dick, how about you?
Well, I think we should wait until the state hands us something to put into words, because I think if we try to create it ourselves, we'd just be asking.
my recommendation, if you could do anything, would be to, whether the selectmen keep hammering on the fire marshal's office, the planning boards keep hammering on the fire marshal's office, and say, you know, I sent a letter basically asking to clarify some stuff, and I don't feel, what they clarified, I already know, because it's pretty
You can read it too.
bullshit. I felt they kind of avoided what I was asking. They did a good job of it.
I'll have a lawyer refuse to carry it.
When it's gonna
But
change.
the more other people hammer on this, like a really good bullet, like bulletins are really good from the fire marshal's office, because it's one page, you can read it, you can say, okay, that's what we gotta do, that's what we understand. And I tried getting them to send them, I talked to one of the assistant fire marshals, and I'm like, you really gotta push them to put some more bulletins out and try to explain it better so people like you guys know, me trying to explain it all.
When it's gonna change is when the state wants to collect the room and meals tax. That's when you'll start to see enforcement, because they can make money at it. They're not gonna even worry about it until it's profitable.
They are getting some of that anyhow.
So it started, well, that it, Airbnb drove that to the point where, hey, we're missing out on, you know.
Where these codes come from, that's when people die in fires. That's where they all have come from. When some building somewhere burns and kills a whole bunch of people, that's when the fire marshal's office is going to kick in and make the rule. That's when it'll happen. This goes back to the 1900s. I mean, that's where all these codes come from. Something big happens, a lot of people die, they create the code. it's reactive, and it goes back to Worcester, it goes back to the shirtwaist fire in Brooklyn or wherever it was. I mean, the codes that develop from those type of fires, where they come from. So when something happens in the state, then you'll see this fire marshal. I mean, the fire marshal's office was pretty much ignoring the rules and regulations on tents. I mean, the rules were there, but they were ignoring it, they weren't pushing nothing, they weren't forcing nothing, they weren't talking about it. 2 people died in Lancaster and the tent falls down, and then boom, everything goes through the roof. So that's when it will happen.
Jay, did you send this out through e-news or something and I missed it?
I don't know if we put it on e-news. I started with a handout. I mean, you're more than welcome to take it and put it on e-news. I'm not sure whether to put it on e-news for me or not. But go for it. Well, I can have it done.
Yeah, I mean, Julie could put it out. Or Julie could do it or something, or I mean, I'm happy to, whatever, but, so you would like it to go out?
There's no reason why I can't
Okay.
to help.
I know she can't send out attachments, so we have to
Yeah.
type it into.
Or is it possible to get it on the town website?
I bet that would be easy too.
My goal was to create something simple, informative, and short, and sweet, and get the point across. And I don't know if you guys read that first page, whether I succeeded in that, and try to get my point across to people that are renting.
My first page doesn't talk about grills. Did you say something about grills?
That's another whole thing.
Should that go out of the e-news too?
We could at some point, yeah.
Okay, no rush on it, whatever.
No, that's been out there for an awful
Yeah, that's
long
been-
time, 1996 or so. I think.
Right, but still, there's probably a lot of people who don't think about that.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
it's pretty specific to like condos and
Yeah.
multi-unit.
I lived in a condo in Glen, so in a part of the board,
Yeah.
and we had problems with people doing
Yeah.
that, so I'm familiar.
The only other piece of this that we didn't talk about was townhouses. So the only other way, it takes a very unique building, I think, to make it a townhouse, but you could probably go, haven't thought about this much, but on the short-term rental side of it, but you could, if you build, you can get away from the sprinkler code by creating a townhouse, which means you gotta have a firewall between units that is continuous, like from the ground through the roof and above the roof. That's what makes it a townhouse, and you don't have to sprinkle it, you can be more than, you can have 1 and 2 family here and 1 and 2 family over here, makes it 4, so it's not really enlarged, but it's still 1 and 2 family as a townhouse. Now, how that falls into play with short-term rentals, I guess if you had a house that you wanted a few extra bedrooms and it wasn't meeting the code, maybe you could grade it in between with a firewall.
You can do that in certain zones in town, that's a problem.
The problem is, it's gotta be a very unique, it's gotta be a specific building, because the firewall has to go from the ground continuous through the roof. And again, there's a lot of codes with plumbing and electrical, you can only have so many outlets, they gotta be fire rated, sealed just right. We ran into that, some of the condos, the Black Mountain, are built that way. The newest ones that we built have a continuous firewall.
You mentioned that the taxes will be the thing that will drive that. The other piece, I think, that may impact, particularly the owner of a property, is the insurance. And what kind of insurance is necessary, and whether or not to your point, when something does happen, and then they go, oh, yeah, my insurance doesn't cover because.
I mean, I think if stuff starts happening, kicking in, and we start having problems, and we start having things happen, then maybe that's the time to create something, but I don't see a lot of issues. I mean, I'm sure there's some. Just
Thank you.
everything we do.
Thank you so much for
I hope
your
I
attention.
explained it, because some of the code stuff is pretty confusing.
They do it on purpose.
While I was here, I don't know if I have any other things, no. I don't think so.
Well, thank you, and if you do have something, please let us know, and we're happy to have you here, and we'll give you a public forum.
Right, we really drew them in tonight.
Well, it was a public hearing night, and so, it's a good one to be here.
Yeah, so hope that helps. I don't know if it helps you or confuses you, but.
Definitely helpful, I think it increases my understanding of
Yeah,
some level.
I really didn't have a clue.
Yeah.
We don't have a problem. That's great.
Any questions, Scott? You missed kind of the beginning, but a little bit at the end.
I'm guessing the ordinance we were talking about was for short-term rentals to have inspections or
Yes.
something or something.
The potential need for such a thing. Right?
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jay. So at this point, I will welcome public attendees for the public hearing. Apologize for the delay, but I think the discussion was of great value. So before we get to the official public hearing, is there any public comment, please, on any matter not before the planning board this evening? This is your opportunity.
Should I wait until something about Airbnb? 'Cause I have-
Yeah, you want one?
I'm not sure that anything that we have for the public hearing piece has anything to do with the Airbnb, so if that's something that you'd like to talk about briefly, sure.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I don't know if anyone saw what the state of Massachusetts.
Could you please identify yourself?
Oh, okay. Kevin Bennett, I'm Jackson Building Inspector. And I was wondering if anyone saw what the state of Massachusetts just passed on Airbnbs. And I forget when it's going into effect, but it's going to be law. And basically, if you rent your house less than 14 days a year, you don't have to comply with these laws.
Right.
If it's over 14 days, you have to carry house insurance, which is probably liability and some kind of insurance, so if anyone gets hurt or whatever, at the establishment. The state's going to tax you, I think it was 5.6%, I believe. And it was going to give each individual town the right to tax up to 6% on their own. I don't know what, if you did tax them, I don't know if there's laws on what you do with that money.
There's a tax on the rental.
On the rental, right. So, I mean, there's a perfect spot for the town to put into, workforce housing or whatever, something like that, or senior citizen housing or something, or I thought it's, the more people you bring into town, the more services you need, like police. The town of Jackson is talking about another police officer. Do you funnel that money to that because there's more services?
So it's 14 days or more. But-
Yes.
But is there rental periods or?
It didn't say, so I think the typical thing is like if someone, if you go on vacation, you're like, like you leave your house. It's for the person, like if you go away, you want to rent your house. You go away for a week and.
Right, but how do they define a short-term rental versus a long-term rental?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it just said it had something with the 14-day limit over a year period. So I didn't know how to keep track of that.
The federal tax law allows you to rent a property, and then also a lot of insurance policies. Also, if you don't exceed 14 days,
So
you
something with
don't
that.
have to obtain the additional renter's insurance. And if you, for the federal tax law, if you can write off your interest rates, for example, and not consider it rental income against it. If it's less than 14. So there's a lot of different 14 things that triggers for 14 days, I think, that currently. Whereas the Airbnb, as you're describing, may end up exceeding 14 days.
Right.
And sometimes it's hard, as Jay was suggesting, to know whether somebody's actually making 14 takes or not.
Sure.
And
It sounds to me as if that could be confusing for people who want to rent long-term. I mean, there are plenty of people who want to be long-term tenants or want to have long-term tenants in their homes. I wonder how that works. Do you still pay that same fee that would be for short
the
term?
federal tax law is very clear.
Yeah.
Right.
If you're renting long-term, then that's an income
It's
property.
an income property, period. And if you do that, if you are obtaining insurance and you are renting for more than 14 days, you better have renter's insurance
Right, but are you also paying that new state tax in Massachusetts? I
in
wonder.
Massachusetts, but you're not in Massachusetts, so.
No, I know.
Not to worry about that. I don't think we'll ever see it in New Hampshire.
Well, that's probably very true.
Good question. And just another thought too, I mean, I can think of a couple properties in this town that, you know, someone either owns 1, 2, 3 houses and they're never gonna live in the house. So basically, that's a business right now, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
If you're renting a place, you're not living there, you're never gonna live there, that's a business. And especially the bigger size, like we're talking like one house, 7 bedrooms, where there's no regulations, where if the other, you know, Airbnbs, or not Airbnbs, but like hotels or motels or a smaller scale, where they have all these, you know, laws they have to,
Taxes.
yeah, taxes, right, pay extra for, because of their, you know, what their, you know, their occupancy, what they're called, either hotel or motel. And I don't know, you know, I guess there's neighborhoods here in town too. I mean, I've heard, and there's not a lot of complaints, but, you know, there's a couple houses that, you know, there's people live in the neighborhood, but there's always like that one rental, and there's always people in and out, you know, different groups of people, and, you know, 89% of the time it's fine. It's at, you know, 10%, once every couple months, you know, it's the loud party, they're up, you know, a little bonfire in the backyard till 2 in the morning. And, you know, I don't know how you control that, but, and I heard through the, I go to meetings down in Concord for the building association, and there's a lot of people who are, they represent us to the legislature. So they know a lot of what's going on all the time. And they introduced like 80 bills last year, and for the home builders and for the building inspectors, and, you know, only like 5 even got to the floor or whatever. And I think they're all beat up or whatever, all brought down. But anyway, I think this year they're really going to try to talk about that. And I think there's more Democrats in the House now too, which I think that changes things too a little bit.
One thing that some towns in Massachusetts have done, they're on the opposite side, is they've given a discount on property taxes for properties that are long-term occupied. And so, and significant discounts, I think, up to like 30%. And so really all you're doing is shifting the property tax onto the people that are doing short-term rental, but you're doing it in a way that's more of an incentive, stands up to challenge better in court, you know, and also gets more support from the town, because most of the town gets a benefit from it. But that seems to have been, like Nantucket, I think was the last town that adopted it. And that seems to be a different approach that's a little bit more politically acceptable, and probably at least as effective as any more, you know, disincentive types, unless we can just say no, which I'm sure the state is not going to allow us to do. But again, that has to come from the state.
Right.
Massachusetts is home rule, so the towns can do a little bit more on their own.
But that's all I have. I think, like Dick was saying, it's, you know, see what happens from what comes from the state this year. And I know too on the fire sprinkler, they're really going to try to pass that. They're between the fire marshal's office, the home building association, and they're hashing things out, so see what happens, and hopefully they'll try to pass the 2015 building code too. And there's one part of that that's actually the energy code that we're still in 2009, and this has been some major changes for the better in the 15 code, so hopefully they get their act together and they pass that and get back on track with, I think, the other 20, 25 states in the United States that are adopted the 2015 code.
Thank you. All right, tonight we have a public hearing, and the public hearing is to deal with really two things. One is that we have had recommendations by our housing committee for changes in the zoning ordinance to help us drive the potential for more housing diversity in Jackson. And we have reviewed the recommendation and attempted as best we could to codify changes in the zoning ordinance to enable potentially more housing of a lesser price, I guess, more affordable maybe. And the other is that while doing the subdivision approval, we had some issues with, I think, what is a private road and how do we define it best? And that found that our zoning ordinance was lacking in clarity and true definition, such that 7 people sitting at the table here couldn't agree. And we thought we knew what we were talking about, some of us, and still came up short. So what we've done is we're looking to do a warrant article for review by the town meeting and hopefully approval by them for changes in private road definition and also the changes which are listed in the, everyone who's here wants one, have a handout.
I passed them out, they have them.
Yep, okay, great.
This did get noticed, by the way, in the Conway Daily Sun on Saturday, December 29th, as required, and it also went out in the e-news and was posted, et cetera.
So I'd like to open this up for discussion by the board, and if there are any comments from the other, I'd appreciate if you address them to me, and then we'll recognize you and allow you to join in. So for the board, please, any discussion?
I've just read proposed amendment 1, I've read it before. I think-
Let's look at that private road first, okay, please? And, yeah.
Well, what I was going to say is I think it's a very simple, nicely worded definition. I don't think it needs to get any more complicated than that.
Again, as a board, we have reviewed this and approved this. But, we get one last look.
If we approved everything here?
We did, yes.
Okay, well, gee, I'll keep my mouth shut. Watch that clock go faster. I don't bother.
Any comments from the public?
Several questions.
Please identify who you are again. With
Jerry Doherty, Christmas Farm Lane, Jackson.
Thank you.
The question kind of refers to what you just said, that did the board have these in front of them when they voted to,
Yes,
okay, as a board?
yes.
And that's in your minutes?
The minutes said that we did not have the final copies of these as a board when we reviewed them last, and that we would look at them again tonight, but we did approve them previous to that date, and they were not changed from what was approved in an earlier meeting.
Then my second question has to do with frontage. Would you explain to me what your rules on frontage are? It's not entirely clear.
Okay, we're sticking right now to the private road conversation, so
It looks like it's 200 and then
okay,
125.
that that change is part of the second discussion we'll have. So I'm just looking at private road right now, that has nothing to do with private road.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were doing it by
I'm
section.
trying to do it by piece, like we could. Any comments on private road? We're good on private road? Okay. I'll move on to the second piece. Jerry, I apologize, but I'm just trying to keep it orderly here. Is there any discussion among the board looking at it, final look? Any, on the proposed amendment 2? Hearing none, Jerry, is this where you want to push in on the frontage?
Yes. Could you, I guess,
And I'm gonna ask Scott, because Scott's our expert on this, and I am not.
I guess the question, Scott, would be then, what's the justification for the 125 feet?
I don't see that.
Yeah, it's a single family.
That's on
Oh, you wrote it back.
So how do you mean?
10.6.2.2.
Amendment 2 is just.
A single lot created for affordable workforce housing shall have the tools 125 foot frontage. And I may be jumping ahead, but to me it's all frontage, you're talking about frontage.
You might not have the correct one.
You said the very last sentence.
Right.
If you want, I'll wait till we get to that one, but I guess I could ask it to the 200 foot. What is the concept behind the 200 foot frontage?
200 is what it's been.
I recognize that, but what's the point of it?
I would guess that when that ordinance was written, 200 feet was a way of keeping density along the street minimal. I'm not sure it's always successful at that, but
So if you have a 14 acre lot that has 180 feet frontage, you need to build a 200 foot road into it to allow someone to subdivide it into 2 lots?
well, you'd have the 180 feet, so you'd need a 20-foot road into it, right? You get both road frontage.
So you need a 200 foot road into that lot.
No, he's saying a 20-foot road, which was 180 plus your 20 or whatever.
So the frontage can be an L then?
Yeah, I just said, I'm not sure. But in any case, whether it's a 200-foot road or a 20-foot road, you need a 200 feet of frontage at the moment.
In other words, you have 180 feet along Route 16,
Right.
Yep. And the answer is,
and you have a 20 acre lot.
yeah.
So you could get,
One long skinny lot.
you could get 2
Well,
homes on a
it's a lot
driveway.
more like that.
Yeah.
You can get 2 homes on one driveway, right?
Yeah, in other words, you want 2 lots. How do you get a 200 foot?
Yeah,
Oh,
if you have
yeah.
180 feet, you can't subdivide without adding frontage.
A 200 foot road?
I don't understand what that means.
Yeah, I don't know.
I understand what
Well,
you're saying.
I think the question
Here's a lot. It comes down to Route 16 like this.
Yeah,
And it's 20 acres.
yeah, I think
And it's got 100 foot or 120 feet or whatever, but it's got 100 feet, let's say. So how do you subdivide that lot?
You
Oh, I
can't.
see what you're
Of
saying.
course you can. You put a 200 foot road
Well, you can do
up
that.
into it.
Sure.
And so my point is, why does that road have to be 200 feet?
Because we require 200 feet of frontage.
I
I didn't.
I would read this too, Scott. The point is, what is the point of it?
We don't know. We didn't. None of us here.
What is the point of 200 feet
Right.
of frontage?
Right. My guess is that we used 200 feet because that seemed to be an amount that would keep density along the road minimal. It doesn't always succeed at that because you can build a road into your lot and create actually more density than you probably would have otherwise. And so I'm a proponent for reducing frontage. I'm not sure, where you want to bring it down to, but and that's where the 125 feet came from. It's a way of allowing what we felt.
Increase in density, that's what you're thinking. What I think is, why on a on this, the lots that go like this, that have a lot of acreage, it could take 1, 2, or 3 lots, is it necessary to build 200 feet of road into the lot?
According to our current ordinance, yes.
Wouldn't you
I
have to?
don't know how you're gonna develop the back lots without the 200-foot road. Because, what you said, now, Levitt towns are 110. And they're lot, you know, it's 110 feet. And there's one behind you in a row, you know. So I think that's what the 200 feet originally was about, is we don't want the density of Levittown. It happened on the Time Road, because there are lots up there with 110 feet of road frontage. And because they are lots of record, they're buildable.
Again, I'm not talking about that kind of situation.
Yeah, the other issue is that like, from what you described, though, if you're gonna subdivide a 14-acre property and you have 180 footage of frontage, the only way you're going to have the ability to develop that property would then be to have rear lots. And then you would have...
I was saying with 2 side-by-side lots.
Yeah, with 90 foot, but still, your issue is you're going to have a likelihood of, well, you described it like this, and 200 feet is not a lot of feet. Trying to put something with 40 feet on each end, you basically, if it's 90 feet, you only have 10 feet to build your house.
Actually, you'd only need 100 feet, if you had 100-foot frontage, because then you could have your 2 lots. But I guess it also drew it for...
If you're just looking at it practically, though, what you're describing ends up having a rear lot. And then you have issues with driveways, you have issues with whether or not you can get emergency vehicles in on that, you have issues as to whether or not people are trying to avoid building a road that's going to service the property.
If you have a lot with 200 feet and a driveway that's 75 feet, you have the same issues.
Again, then you're in the same situation as everyone else with a single-family home, as opposed to creating, and I have been in places where the rear lots are a problem, and they are a significant problem.
You're misunderstanding. I'm not
I'm thinking yes, you are. With a 90-foot frontage, you're talking about a rear lot. Think about what your requirement is for a home. Think about what your requirement is.
You have an 18-acre lot that goes like this.
What's your side
line right down the center?
Okay, and so now
to have that subdivision work by your rules, you need to build a 200-foot road up in the center of it to have 2 side-by-side lots.
That's right.
And my question is...
Because you have to go far enough up that lot in order to get the proper frontage for being 40 feet away, you know, your setback is going to be sufficiently large that you're going to need a 200-foot driveway to get that. And so what we're suggesting is that driveway needs to be something that an emergency vehicle can get at. And you can draw it out. This guy over here can draw you a picture and tell you that, you know, the geometry of it just doesn't work. You're going to end up with a rear lot. Or your house is going to be far enough out and away from the road where they're not going to be able to...
What is your justification from going to 200 feet to 125 feet, based on what you're talking about?
Okay, that is to encourage people, because I think it's in the section for workforce and affordable housing. So it's to, like, okay, if you're going to put in affordable housing, we'll let you get by with 125 feet. I think
And therefore, on that same lot that I'm describing, how does a 125-foot road work and a 200, where you have just explained to me that a 200-foot road is necessary?
So what do we have for frontage?
180. Something under 200 feet.
So you've got 90 feet, if you do it L-shaped, you've got 90 feet of frontage on each side. You said you were going for 2 lots. So you only have to go in 110 feet, because then you come down and then you have the 90 feet on either side of that. But I think we're fighting over some words that I don't think are, this ordinance is harmful.
I'm not saying the ordinance is harmful.
Okay, I'm not trying to help. I think I should move ahead with it, because it is helpful, and it states the case. Now, I believe there are any number of scenarios that we could twist around and what if, but I think this is helpful.
I do too.
Okay.
I think 125 feet is a good idea. But I just wonder, can you explain to me the justification of 200 feet and then explain to me the justification of 125?
I just did. 125 is an incentive. 200 feet goes back to when folks in this town wanted to keep a more rural feel to it. So they didn't want houses every 110 feet. They wanted one every 200 feet. And that gives you a little more room, probably have bigger houses, and still have your 25-foot offset from the sidelines. Now it's 25 feet from the road, but I think the 200 feet, I don't think we were ready to get rid of 200 feet. I think that was, maybe it's an aesthetic call. I don't think it has direct need, but I think it is someplace in aesthetics. So, and I don't think that any of these words are harmful. I think if anything, we're trying to get to the point where 125-foot frontage may encourage somebody to develop affordable houses.
And to get at the example that you proposed, Jerry, we have sort of
A
wedge-shaped property. You're probably right, at 90 feet, if that were possible, because as Bill, demonstrated, the house is going to be so far off the road, it's really not going to create much density. But how do you define that type of situation versus someone that's got a 2-acre lot, with 180 feet, or a 4-acre lot?
Well, a 2-acre lot can't be subdivided.
Well, 4-acre lot with 180 feet. I mean, how do you define?
And in Jackson, most 4-acre lots can't.
How do you define your situation versus any other?
Well, the state does by soil ability.
And so
No, I'm saying, you're saying you got 18 acres, but 180 feet of frontage.
Yeah.
So why can't you subdivide that? And I'm saying, well, that probably wouldn't be a problem because you'd end up putting the houses so far back that they wouldn't create much density. But how do you, in an ordinance, how do you define that situation versus someone that's got, 4 or 5 acres with 180, and those homes are going to be much closer to the road? Or, I think it's trying to be fair to everybody, and it means in some cases that someone that has a situation where, it wouldn't cause any density.
In order to qualify for the 125 feet for the affordable or workforce housing, what definition are you using for affordable?
The same as we've had in
The
New
state's
York.
definition.
No, the same as in our ordinance, I think.
Same as that is in our ordinance currently. We've not made any change to that.
And that's based on 1 bedroom at one rate, 2 bedrooms at a second level, 3 bedrooms at a third level, is that correct?
No,
It's
affordable housing is,
an income basis.
it's income based.
The way we approached this was
Do you have
to
your
try to make
ordinance in
this as
No, doesn't the state have one definition of affordable at 1 bedroom, one definition at 2 bedroom, another definition at 3 bedroom?
We're not requiring any certain number of bedrooms, I believe, in the ordinance wording that we've had.
Right. This means the ordinance we're looking at here, you have a property with 325 feet of frontage. Right now, you can't subdivide that because you need 400 feet of frontage to subdivide without building a road.
You mean for two lots?
Right. Under this ordinance, if you had 325, you could subdivide. You create one lot of 200, which would be our standard lot, and then a second lot of 125. But that second lot could only be sold at a price and to a purchaser as defined by the authority in our ordinance.
Which is around what?
It's defined in 10.2 and the certification of income levels is 10.5. You have your ordinance with you, it's page 14.
And that's not in this, that's in another place.
That's
In
in
different
what already,
Right.
what we've got now. What we're doing, Jerry, is that we're not trying to change everything all at once. The proposal number 2, proposed amendment, actually is only trying to get the definition of private road, that to be consistent, or to say it the other way around, we have to have section 4.3.1 having to do with frontage, where it talks about a road, just to have that consistent with the definition that we are proposing for private road up in 3.31. And so we're not dealing with frontage at that point, we're just trying to deal with definition of a road. That's the only change at that point. If we want to talk about frontage, that's a whole other issue, and I think we found in the past that if you try to cram too many changes into a particular proposal, that your possibility of getting it passed really is reduced, because you're going to have people who would say, well, I like one part of it, but I don't like the other, so I'm not going to vote for it. So in this case, we're kind of doing it stepwise, and we'll probably address the whole issue of frontage at another time. At this point, we were just trying to be consistent with our definition of private road for those first two proposals, and amendment 3 and 4, those proposed amendments have to do with the housing, affordable housing situation.
Thank you.
Any further comment or? All right.
Moving on to 3.
Moving on. Okay. Any comments, conversation, any suggestion that we need to change? This was our opportunity to, again, share what we've already approved.
This is number 3.
Proposed number 3. I'm not going to read it, because you guys can read it. Hearing no comments for proposed amendment 4. Any public comment on 4? Anybody need more time?
I like the way Sarah's worked the wording of that proposed amendment 4, because it makes it more clear, and it allows us to really expand opportunities, I think, into not just clustered developments, but single lots that really could benefit the town more.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Just housekeeping, for the housekeeping. Those items are items that are not changes in what we're doing, but they are changes that will need to be made so that references are properly referenced.
Yes, you mean so that we won't have it in what we publish, we'll just have it for our memories as we go to print.
Yes.
Great, I think that's a good point.
Say it again, so you're not going to italicize it.
When we publish this for the town, the warrant and so on, we won't include this part, because it's just going to confuse us.
It's simply
Housekeeping.
surely it's housekeeping.
We can make those changes, or...
We have the authority to do that without asking permission.
And the reason not to make those changes now is, as far as changing numbers, and is that if you want to, if people are reading the proposed amendments and they have their ordinance, they're going to look at section 10, and leave it at section 10 and section 8 the way they are now.
Right.
And then after whatever gets approved, we can put it in, and it's up to us to make sure the final numbers are.
Presuming that we get an approval, then these changes will need to occur.
Right.
Right.
Gotcha.
And so next we would send these, I think, to Peter Malliot.
I
Can we
think
get
so. I think-
permission?
Well, I think
send
he
them?
needs to review anything that he has to defend, he
Yes.
likes to review.
And therefore, do we have permission, or do we need to
Absolutely.
make a specific request?
You don't have to have anything in writing.
This will be considered official. All right. So, Madam Secretary, you will do that?
And before we adjourn, I have one tiny little thing to add, under sort of new business type stuff. Is there a possibility of that? Or are you on to something else? I don't mean to
I
interject.
don't know, Chris is, yeah,
There's no football game on tonight.
The Celtics are playing.
assuming it's not too large an issue, like, you know.
It's a tiny, tiny, tiny issue. In fact,
We've heard that before.
it's about a tiny house.
Oh.
And there is right now legislation being proposed at the state, by the legislature, some guy in the House whose name I've forgotten, who is saying that any town that allows ADUs, the accessory dwelling units, would automatically be including in that the possibility of putting in a tiny home. Which would be really interesting. In other words,
Did you see his face?
Yeah, as long as I have a egress window.
so we wouldn't have to do anything in our ordinance, which I know we talked about the possibility of having to add in wording about tiny houses. And if that bill were to pass, then we'd just be dealing with their regulations, not our own, which is nice.
Which is good if you don't have to create Jackson
Well, yeah,
specific regulations.
Because there's something that's always something about minimum size.
Yes.
I forget what that is, and I think
There
that's
are-
the issue.
yes, there are-
And like I said, the only issue between the fire chief and me is the sleeping area.
Right,
It's
the
gonna require either a restraining order or it's gonna be an egress window.
So I don't think we have minimum size, we have maximum size, right? It can't be more than 1,000 square feet if it's an accessory.
That's true, but also in the building code itself, it
Oh.
talks about, there's certain minimum areas for like kitchens.
Okay.
I have to read it in the building code. And there's something about like where you can sleep too, there's a minimum area.
Right.
They don't want to put you in a closet, put it that way.
Right.
They like lie down and I think
Or under the
it's
staircase.
square feet.
Very high.
Yeah, ventilation, yeah, there's a couple requirements, but I think the big thing is the safety thing is a lot of these homes don't have, like I said, it's a loft up above, the windows this big, and how do you get out if you have to get outside, it needs an egress. So that's why they have the egress window, because, usually you can get out or a firefighter can get to you or whatever.
Skylight with a ladder.
So, well, yeah, a few people
Yeah, big
tried that.
spring.
Yeah.
With the mattress.
Springboard, yeah. You have to go through gymnastics first.
So at least if the state were to pass it, it wouldn't be us worrying about how to phrase the, you know.
Oh, exactly, for that one, yeah, one part of that, I think, yes, yeah. And I've seen tiny houses with egress windows.
Yeah, the town doesn't have to adopt things to be required to meet the state code.
Right,
That's the law whether the town adopts it or
whether
not.
we like it or not, yeah. All right, any further business?
No, it's only here.
Hearing none, so I hear
Not for me, I never do that.
I move the agreement.
I hear a second.
No, I was second, yes, no, I was talking to the second.
Oh, it's you.
No, you're not.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye, thank you.
Gee, that's when you, how do you know?